Thanks for joining us for Speeding Up Sales. We're going to cover a lot of ground this morning, and so we want to get right into it. My name is Glenn Schmausley. I'm joining you today from the studios of Talking Bluntly, and we want to thank them for their participation in helping us bring this webinar to you today. Our agenda is very simple. We have some quick housekeeping to take care of, then we're going to get right into the presentation, and if you have questions later, we want to get to those as well. To be able to put questions in, I'm going to refer you to the panel that is on the right-hand side of your screen. Please type any questions that you see in there, and we will be glad at the end of the webinar to put those questions to our presenter. So without further ado, I'm going to tell you about our presenter today, who is Peter Fillmore, the founder and CEO of SmartFunnel.com. Peter has a long career, started with IBM, and he increasingly took on assignments in marketing programs, product line management, and sales, and has managed for over 80 different B2B companies these functions. And as he went through that process, and then further on as a consultant, he couldn't help but notice the similarities between companies that are trying to speed up sales and improve their forecasting, and how they were having challenges with that. So he set about to design a methodology and then a product that actually brings that problem to the fore, and he's able to share his knowledge about how businesses can take advantage of these methods to speed up their sales. And he also blogs regularly and speaks on these topics. So without further ado, we are going to pass it over to Peter Fillmore. Peter?
Hello, Glenn, and hello all you folks out there in webinar land. It's a great pleasure to have you and an honor to have you here to hear what we're going to chat about today. As Glenn said, in a nutshell, I've done a lot of work in sales, marketing, and market management and product line strategies with quite a number of small companies, and starting with the big company IBM, which was a great learning place for me in getting my career started. And so in addition, I've actually done consulting for most of the last 20 years. We founded SmartFunnel.com about 4 years ago with a view to taking some of these ideas and packaging them into a product. Today's session, however, is just about the ideas that are at the core of what we call collaboration selling, a series of discoveries that we have made about what works and what doesn't work, from looking at things that are basically failure models versus some success models that sales teams use, and sort of coalescing that into the ideas that we're going to discuss today. Now, this session takes about 40 minutes for me to run through it. It's in 4 different segments. So in a second, I'll just show you the agenda, and we'll get into the details of what this thing is going to look like. This is all about how to craft proposals that close faster and are nearly impossible for prospects to refuse. And that sounds like a bit of a bold statement to make at the beginning of this kind of webinar. However, I've actually seen the dynamic of how this works. Okay, so the agenda is we're going to talk about stalled deals. Typically in sales teams that I visit, and probably some of the teams you now work with or have worked with, there are things called stalled deals, and that's usually a deal where you think you should have closed it within 4 to 6 months, let's say, and for some reason it's been on the agenda, it's been on your funnel list for 9, 10, 12 months, and it's just getting frustrating for you. So we'll talk about that scenario, and then the first thing I'm going to do is do something I love doing on whiteboarding, which is paint a little picture of the end game that you should be aiming for, which is really the end game that goes on inside your customer's buyer committee, and then how to deflect a proposal request, which is part of this whole thing. And I'm going to wrap up with some comments on coaching, things that you can do, and we'll take it from there. So who among us has stalled deals? Well, think about that. I'm assuming most of you are in sales, or you're in something close to sales, such as a marketing function, or you're in executive management, and you'll be painfully aware if you have any stalled deals. And usually companies that are in B2B sales have got 20, 30, 40, 50 or more opportunities they're working on, and you actually would like to have even more. The trap we get into is if our lead generation is successful, we end up with more deals on the list, and then we start kind of rushing some of the dialogues that we have with clients, and we end up with actually a greater number of stalled deals, and in fact maybe a greater proportion of stalled deals as we add more leads to the funnel. So because of the stalled deals, some of us are missing our targets, some of us are not able to forecast accurately and missing whatever we said we would be able to do during the next 3 months. And at the same time, we have the scenario of this gentleman in the underneath the clock feeling that I'm always too busy. Well, you know what? I've been there, done that. We at SmartFunnel have been there and done that. And these are the things that we're going to talk about today as to how to get around that scenario a little bit better. So the first thing is, why do deals stall? Well, we're usually talking to a champion. I'm sure you're familiar with that term. That's a person inside the organization that has a belief in the importance of a problem they have and how they should take some action to solve that business problem. And they unfortunately tend to say things like, yes, we're going to move on this, we have budget, or we can get budget for this. And basically, I've noticed that they tend to mislead salespeople. And incidentally, I'm not the only one that's noticed this. I can remember a presentation months back from a sales guru that I know locally who said basically customers lie to you. And it goes back to the way we behave in a retail environment. If a salesman comes up to you when you're in a store, asks if you need any help, you'll say, no, I'm just looking. And you could be there to spend $500, or you could literally be just there just looking. So the issue with business-to-business sales is more complicated, and in fact, champions have to sell an innovation. So we've portrayed a gentleman at the bottom of this screen here, and I'm going to just introduce the team to you. That person, your primary contact in the customer organization, as champion, will eventually have to get into the end game of the buyer process, talking to a VIP, an executive, the president, it depends, and you'll sort of read it from company to company as to who the final decision maker is. And in addition, you're there talking to them, and in addition, behind the scenes, there are others that are going to get involved in this, and they may be supporters or they may be blockers. So you have to be aware of the dynamics of all this. And these techniques that we're talking about, by the way, are primarily for selling to decision-making teams. That's the environment that I've lived in so much, and I'm trying to share some of those ideas with you. So when you, first of all, look at that cast of characters that we just introduced, you have to ask yourself, who is the salesperson? Well, if the customer champion says to you, you know what, just give me your specs, give me your prices, I'll go get the funding for this. If you accept that, then you're letting them be the salesperson. And I want to say to you, champions are not good salespeople. And I'm not the only one that has seen this. I had a really interesting podcast I heard recently by a gentleman named Brian Burns. And he says, basically, when you think of the champion, as a salesperson, they don't know how to work the buy process. So I'm going to get into some of the dynamics of that. But basically, if you let the champion sell, the deals die. Often, getting an approval for some project, and when I talk B2B, I'm usually talking $10,000, $20,000, anywhere up to $10 million. You're talking about getting a committee to do something. You need a business plan. You need much more than what the champion is comfortable with doing or where his past experience is. So why do deals stall? The first answer is champions often prepare weak, really weak internal proposals. And it's very easy for that decision maker to say, well, you know what, I just don't buy it. I don't think it's important in the business, and so on. So what happens, though, is that in terms of the discussion with the champion and our going back to the office, we can hold up a piece of paper that says, look, we're doing really well. We've got a projection. We have 20 deals active. It looks like we're going to close 12 of them within the next 3 months. It'll always look like that. And that euphoria makes everybody think, boy, we can take it to the bank. Now we have an active sales funnel. Look at the vault opening. We're going to just cash in on this market. Unfortunately, as we see, we often have our salesperson and our sales manager breaking their pencil and saying, ouch, this is very, very frustrating. This thing has been lagging for months and months. The champion now won't answer our calls. The champion won't answer our emails. They feel that we're pestering them. When I ask you to go close the deal, you feel trapped as a salesperson because you don't actually know what to do next other than pester the customer. And by the way, for some of your stale deals, the techniques that I'm going to talk about can actually be used to go back in and recover these. So we'll get back to that later. The beginning, let's rethink how we sell. If we anticipate that we're going to have problems, this is a simple trick that any business person should know. Ask yourself how you can win. Ask yourself how you can lose. And if we think about how we sell, we really need to define the end game, because that play that you're making to dialogue with the champion, get your proposal in place, that's going to go to the executive buyer, and there's going to be a lot of tough questions asked. Interestingly, there's a pattern to those questions, and they're the same in almost every business. All of you will have buyers, executive buyers, who ask 3 or 4 questions, and I'll show you what they are. So if we anticipate that, we're going to plan the end game, and that's how we're going to win it. So that's our introduction. Now we're into the second section of this Speeding Up Sales webinar, and I look forward to telling you what the secrets are of how we plan and win the end game. So the first thing is, when you look at the end game, look at two people sitting in a room together, and there may be others along the way, but the final decision is going to be made in an environment where the champion goes in and he puts a proposal on the table. That's your proposal. And I deliberately made this one look like a brick, because that's the way the executive looks at it. This guy came in, he talked to the sales guys in that supplier organization, and he's asked me to vet this idea, but look at this huge brick. So the first thing he says is, can you give me a summary of that? I really don't want to read the whole thing. The summary ends up being a 2-page memo, and that's what the executive buyer will buy on. And I'm going to go into the contents of the memo, but it's amazing because it could be only a couple of pages. That's the only thing that gets read. That's the decision-making tool. So your brick is often a waste of time. Remember I talked about the guy who was sitting under the clock feeling he's too busy? So he's got 12 opportunities. He's writing 4 proposals. When he's in a customer meeting, he wants to try and rush to an agreement to go ahead, maybe and write another proposal. So we're going to talk about a different way to look at that. So I want to first of all give you the worldview of the executive buyer by saying that they have a lot of responsibilities to manage. And a typical organization will have your vice presidents and your president of the customer organization have groups of people in the company that do different things. And whether they're the boss or not, they still talk amongst each other at the middle management, at the senior management level. They have a plan for the year. The company that you're selling to has a number of groups of people who each have a mission. They're spending money on that. They put human resources in place, and there are gaps. So things are always breaking or falling through the cracks. There are things that aren't working right. And the executive's job is to meet the business plan for the year by understanding the patterns across those problems and gaps and solving them. If you're going to come in the middle of the year and get budget money, even if you're going to get budget money for next year, you have to be on track with the mission of that company and the mission of the different departments and how they can help each other. Put a tool in place that will provide them a solution to a problem, deliver a payback, and do it in a time that fits their existing business plan timetable. So I'm going to just comment further on the champions because these people have strengths and weaknesses. So this guy in the middle here is actually, if you portray 5 of them that are typical, you get some scenario. I'm going to come to that on the next slide. But you get some scenario here where some of them, like this guy, say, I don't know how to write a business plan. And there are others who are more career-oriented. Maybe they've worked harder on the higher-level issues, and they'll say, I do know how to write a business plan. So the trick is that, in fact, there's a lot of them that don't know how to do it or won't do it. And there's a very small number. It's kind of a 20-80 rule, where 20% of them will be people that can do it, want to do it, and 80% will be, no, I don't want to do it. And that's 80-20, 20-80, whatever you want to call it. I see my in-studio audience nodding at my terminology. So what do champions ask for? Well, with the background I've just given you on how an executive thinks, the champions actually think the same way that they think when they go in to shop for something. Let me look at the product. Let me see what it does. Let's have a demo in the case of a computer system product or some software. What are the product specs and how much does it cost? And if you try and start closing on something in the early meetings, they'll say, great, give me a proposal. I love it. I'd love to do something with this. Well, that's a very dangerous situation to begin. And you have to actually realize that you're in a dangerous situation, because if you accept that, you're going to be in trouble. So we have to learn how to deflect a proposal request. It's one of the most important skills of the professional salesperson, in my view. And even though I'm going to describe it in a few minutes, it's not easy to do. You've got to force yourself to do it. Although, like anything else, and I have a daughter who's learning figure skating, if you're working on learning a trick in your business or in a sport that you love, once you've done it 5 or 10 times, then you'll start to say, I get it, I internalize it. So I'm going to talk to you about deflecting a proposal request. So here's a way to do it. And this section is on deflecting a proposal request. Again, one of the key secret ideas that we've got behind this Speeding Up Sales webinar. And it starts with you saying, you know what, I can't just say no. I mean, I've been tempted to say, we don't do proposals, we don't do quotes. Okay, you got it, you're customers, right? I want you to just respond to the idea that we're going to work on a business plan together, but it's got to start with something more polite than that. So the answer is, and I'll put the exact words on the table that can work for almost any product. Of course, I'd love to write a proposal. However, I'd like to approach it by first understanding your needs and the needs of your business. So then I can present a plan that will be successful and a credit to all who are involved. Now, pause for a second here. The reason that's on the chart in these words so that you can take it home and think about it, it's got several very key ideas in it. It has ideas that deal with the business and the business needs. It has ideas about how a proposal is actually going to be successful if it embodies a plan, and it recognizes that people like to work on things that are successful. So I always like to say, let's do something that's going to be a credit to all who are involved. So that's just part of the psychological dynamic of developing relationships with your clients. So once you've said that, then you can pop the big question. So in summary, we've discussed several key issues: the problems, pain points, what it is that you're trying to accomplish, the benefits that you want to have, and some of the timing issues. I've got a lot of notes here. I've really enjoyed this conversation. And what I'd like to do now is work through creating a project outline that I can share with you as I build it. And then I'll base our proposal on that outline. Does that make sense to you? And as you can see, what typically happens is the customer reaches across the table, and they may do it by a big smile, or they may do it by shaking your hands and thanking you. My experience is that in most cases, most champions will say, yes, I'd love to do that. And then you go ahead and do it. And we'll get into some of the details about how to do that. So in summary, what you're offering is a project outline, and this is going to evolve into an internal proposal. And whatever you call it, whether it's the initial project outline as a draft or the internal proposal, it's going to cover these 4 things: purpose, payback, time drivers, and the proposed solution. So you have no doubt got some ideas in your mind as you're listening to this about your company. You have unique challenges, you have unique tools to communicate with clients. Your products solve certain problems. What I'm saying to you is that these 4 things tend to be the foundation of the decision the customer makes. In all cases, I'm not covering today all the detail about what tools you put together to communicate payback, let's say, or what tricks you use to drive out information about time drivers and get those kind of things in. But I can tell you that of these points that are here, most stalled deals are caused by a lack of concrete argument about the payback and benefits, and a lack of significant time drivers that show why it's important for that business to act, and to act right now. So the project outline has an impression on the executive buyer, and it evolves over time, and I believe it's usually 3 to 6 weeks. One of the tricks that I tend to use, which I suggest to you, is that after they say, I agree to work with you on the project outline, you say, let's schedule meetings, because I hate working with just one next meeting. You say things like, okay, here it is. It's Wednesday, 11 o'clock. Let's meet next Wednesday at 11 o'clock, and let's have 3 meetings over the next 3 weeks at the same time, same day. We'll cover this, we'll draft it, we'll work through the sections of it, and we'll have it completed in the next 3 weeks. How does that sound to you? So usually they give you their time. And if you just do the homework to draft things that they can use, it'll be a very successful development of your internal proposal. So I want to just capture, again, a really good comment from one of the world's best-known sales gurus, Zig Ziglar. And you can actually look this up by just Googling it. What did he say about what are the 5 reasons why somebody wouldn't buy? And these are the 5 of them. No need, no money, no urgency. I found it astonishing when I saw that, to say, you know what, this exactly fits the method. Those 3 things at the top are the things that are tangible, because they can be addressed with a sales process that involves the creation of documents. Short memos that started as a project outline end up covering these points, and give that champion, even though they are weak as a business planner, give them a tool that they can take forward to senior management to get the project done. Or interestingly, give you early visibility that this deal is going to stall. It's not going to get approved because they can't somehow pull it together. And if you look at it and say, well, I can see the development of these 3 ideas. If I were the executive, I wouldn't buy it. Then you should say, I've got to excuse myself from this discussion. We're not going to put in a proposal. So the other 2 points here I just want to briefly mention, Zig, of course, talks about desire and trust. Building relationships is what we all know we have to do well as a salesperson, and that stimulates desire and trust. We're not getting into that in this webinar, but that's clearly a skill issue, and it works very well. You've got to always be trying to increase your skills. There's lots of great blogs that I read for skill ideas, but you've got to see them integrated with some kind of process and some tangible handouts that go to your clients. So as each stage evolves, I want to just now give you a mental picture that I like to use that says, you know what, if we're talking about purpose and needs and we just talk about it, then go back to the office and tell our manager and our team, hey, you know what, these guys have a real good problem that's going to be tough to solve. They want to work with us. They like our solution. The problem's important, blah, blah, blah. That's talk. And the danger is that talk and the emails that go back and forth between you and the customer, a couple of months from now, they're going to be forgotten. So the next test of good sales progress is to take that stage, write it down. Mr. Client, I want to summarize the salient points of what I think your problem is, and put it down, right? And don't do it in email. Even though it may start there as a draft, do it in a document which you put a heading on, say project outline, probably a white paper, because I like to give customers documents that have none of my logos on, because in some cases it fits better for them to take that document, put it under their logo, and make it look more like an insider document. And of course, when you actually get a customer to edit one of your documents, that's what we call collaboration. So he sends it back and says, you know what, you missed a whole bunch of important points. And you can apologize for being so clumsy, but you can just grin to yourself and say, this is great. Everything's going very, very well. In addition, you have, if you're tracking how you do these things at each stage, you have a very simple progress tracking mechanism that you can use and communicate to management for planning purposes or tracking progress for things that managers want to do in terms of looking at the whole funnel from the top down. So that technique that we talk about in the tracking mechanism is what we call collaboration selling. By the way, we're not endeavoring to compete against all the excellent sales trainers that are out there. We have partners who are very highly qualified sales trainers, and I found it interesting that whether people talk about solution selling or velocity selling or turning selling into buying, it's all consistent in terms of the central ideas about how to manage that customer dialogue, build a relationship, and produce business persuasion documents as you go along that process. So the first action item, interestingly, is not just about sales. It's about looking at yourself in the mirror and saying, do I want to be perceived by customers and by my team as just a salesman, or do I want to be perceived as a business leader? Because it takes that kind of a mental attitude of business leadership to ask customers about their business, to get all that information on the table, and to make sure that you produce the quality internal proposal that's going to get the deal for you. The results, of course, can be 100% improvement in sales attainment because, in fact, most salespeople have got at least 50% of their opportunities stalled in one way or another. Okay, so the key concept here is that the end game is all about the executive decision. It's either a buy or no buy, and it's based on these three things that we discovered and that are basically confirmed by what Zig Ziglar has to say about no need, no money, or no time, urgency being things that can stall a deal. Similarly, these are the things that if you work on them will push a deal forward. Co-author the internal proposal. And lastly, set yourself up with the right mental framework. Challenge yourself to think of yourself as a business leader, helping the buyer win the end game of getting that decision. So moving forward to the last section of speeding up sales, I want to talk about coaching. And this phrase, you can do it, is actually a little ambiguous. Coaching is normally thought of something that managers might do in a setting such as we show, one person talking to a few others on the team. Let's take a deal as an example. Let's take a success that we've had, or let's take something that's in trouble and try and figure out how to do it better. It can be one-on-one. It also can be self-coaching. So think of it as something that you can do where you say, I want to have a vision of how I'm going to use this mental image of a bucket of green ink that we fill in steps. We talk with customers, then we write down and send them summaries of things. We work through this at stage 1, purpose and needs. Then we go to stage 2, benefits and paybacks expected, and so on. We build a collaboration culture between ourselves and the customer. And the coaching then goes into working through the other stages since, as I mentioned earlier, you start with the purpose that the customer has, get into your payback activities, and over time you build the information on the time urgency issues and then your proposal. Now there's a little bit of non-linearity to this. So in a simple world, it would be you gather all the purpose information first, and that's the way the dynamic on this chart is building out as I advance through it. In fact, you may have situations where you get a little bit of the time urgency information right at the very beginning. You have to validate it and find more factoids to beef it up a little bit. Or you may be working into a proposal. And in this case, we're actually in the middle of a sales process, or the buy cycle, as I call it. And you're looking at something where you've got a proposal half done, and you've got to ask yourself, gee whiz, I've got sort of medium strength on payback, and I really have a weak situation on time drivers. Should I start pushing to close this proposal, or should I work on something else? And in this case, we've decided to work on payback and get a strong payback analysis that's done in a collaborative fashion with the client. So when you do things like this, rather than closing early and being seen as a pest, your proposals get high marks for relevancy because you work to make it relevant. Or, as I've said earlier, you might take the off-ramp if a client situation doesn't show that you're collaborating on getting strong internal proposals put together. And to give a little promotion, our product that we've developed over the last couple of years is called Smart Funnel, and it provides independent tracking of the elements, anywhere from the 4 major stages up to 12 independent elements that you can name yourself, fit to your business, and associate with sales tools that you may design for your business. So you can do this with a spreadsheet. I've done a lot of this kind of work in my consulting career with just putting together Excel sheets. What we did with Smart Funnel was try and put it into a product. And then, of course, as the list grows, you are tracking your progress on a whole list of opportunities, and you're not just looking at what to do next in one deal, but you're looking at a list like this example, and you say, what should I work on next in this whole funnel? And one of the suggestions might be to work on the time drivers on the pilot project at the top of that list. Similarly, the Plan X opportunity that you're working on with Ford definitely needs some work on time drivers, rather than calling and saying, when are you going to place the order? Because they probably won't place it. So the impact of collaboration selling is that your proposals close faster, basically because you're working on this end game philosophy, with the project outlines as the way the proposal you make early in the discussion. And those are the way that you get the customer focused on having a strong, compelling case to be made to the executive buyer. Remember, in many sales situations, you're selling against other ways to spend money. It's not a direct competitive thing. So if you're lucky enough to be aware of a particular client requirement, start this discussion, start helping with the internal proposal. My own experience is they won't bother calling competitors. Someone else may, the blockers may, or some of the enemies may, but your champion will become pretty much aligned with trying to get your proposal approved, because they don't really want to spend time on too many other options. What they really have to do, and what they can do, is win the battle for the internal funding. It's very difficult for prospects to refuse this methodology, basically because they helped write the proposal. So they're going to love your proposals because they're their proposals. So I want to just mention a couple of testimonials on the methodology. So these are people who are very involved in coaching and very aware of it. One sales manager client of ours, Mal Radalgoda, stated that in 10 weeks after he started using this method, he closed a $250,000 order against 3 large competitors. And the customer said, the reason we picked you was because of the way you approached the sales dialogue. So the next testimonial is from a sales guru by the name of Trevor Wilkins, and Trevor is the author of Turning Selling into Buying, and he basically said the methodology and the system you put together can produce more revenue and sooner than other systems that he's seen in this space. And of course, in terms of the broader picture of what's going on in an organization, particularly small organizations, it's interesting to hear what Jeffrey Moore said. Jeff is a highly respected author of Crossing the Chasm. He looks at these things from a market strategy point of view, and he just likes to see the sales team and the whole company team working towards getting the right orientation in the customer dialogue. And this is the method that works well. So in wrapping up, I'm just going to say we have completed our material for today. We have 2 more webinars on the agenda. A month from now, and the first Wednesday of November, we're going to cover lead generation, the magic that you can accomplish with inbound. And we're a HubSpot partner, by the way. We're very excited about having our team's expertise in both marketing and sales be applied to lead generation as well as all the other things in revenue. And the December webinar topic will be revenue engine. So that's going to be the 3 layers of lead generation, prospect management, and sales funnel management. We suggest that marketing and sales and senior executives, including the CEO, may wish to register for these other events that we're going to have. And in terms of next steps and resources, happy to have you request slides and/or the recording of this session. We will be putting it up on the web. There's resources on our website, white papers, the blog. More things coming there, of course. If a private briefing is of interest and anything to do with the revenue engine, go ahead and please, we encourage you to tell this to your friends and register yourself and/or your associates for other webinars that we're going to have. So I'd like to thank you very much for your attention. That wraps up the material for today. We've covered the 4 topics of why deals stall, what is the end game strategy for recognizing the dynamic of the executive decision maker. The 3rd topic is deflecting a proposal request, specific ideas about how to do that in order to take control of and continue to manage the dialogue so that your customer is successful and also you're going to be successful and quicker. And lastly, a few comments about coaching and methods for looking at progress, tracking progress for each deal and also for the funnel as a whole. So we're now ready to entertain any questions. We're about 40 minutes into it, pretty much on time for this material. Does anybody have any questions?
So we'll start off with a question that has come in first, Peter, regarding the 4 phases that you talked about, purpose, payback, time drivers, and the proposal. Can't help but agree with the questioner here that these are not the standard types of lenses that you use to look at a particular sale, at least for someone who is being asked to log information into a CRM or walk down the hall and go into the sales VP's office and answer the question, well, what activities have you been doing for this opportunity and where are we at? Are you saying that the purpose, payback, time drivers, and proposal stages are a better way to view things? Or exactly how are they different from some of the standard ways that we usually classify a sale while it's moving through the system?
So that's a really good question. I'm going to give a short answer and then a somewhat longer answer. I actually think this is a better way to look at it than most systems. However, being pragmatic and having worked with a number of companies, I realize that people do have other traditional words that they use, and that's one of the reasons our systems are set up so they can be customized. So as a default, we put in words like purpose, payback, and time drivers. But I'll take an example of one of our customers who went through this, and they said, we don't like those terms. So after some discussion, we settled on other terms, and I'll tell you what they are. It was stage 1 is discovery, stage 2 is develop, stage 3 is planning. So words like discovery and develop are actually more familiar to most people in the sales industry. I can see that. What we did in this case was work through exactly how do you define that. So what does it mean in terms of sales activity? And then there was a separate sort of brief explanation. What does it mean to the CEO and the board of directors? Because they tend to be just looking at what are the quarterly results, monthly results, and where's the money going to come from over the next quarter. So the 5 stages that we used there ended up being discovery, develop, planning, potential, and expected. And I'll tell you, that word expected was an interesting one because we had a lot of debate. Again, what this questioner has asked has opened up something that's usually very important. I certainly acknowledge that importance, and I believe you should customize the way you name the stages to fit your business and to settle any disagreements among the sales team and the senior management team as to how you define your early stages that determine the success of the deal, and then your later stages which determine the revenue coming into the company.
I appreciate that, and it does sound like while you are breaking things down in a more granular way, when you've done all that, it sounds like you can really pin your finger on where a particular sale is at, and you're able to say with much better confidence than with old ways of how you think that sale is going to proceed. We've got another one that came in through Twitter, and it was when you were talking about internal champions and how they are being misdirecting when you try to pin them down on what they can expect on a sale. The person answered and they said, I know why they're misdirecting and perhaps not coming clean with you about how strong your chances are of your internal proposal winning. They're lying because of internal risk. They are sticking their neck out already. They're in an organization, I'm sure, that's got many different power sources, and they're trying to get something happening which will benefit their career internally, but yet they don't want to reach all the way out and put their career on the line because you're a vendor and they want your product that badly. Can you tell us how we might mitigate the risk of internal champions who are reticent or reluctant to help out your company's sale, but they will do something? What are the small things that we can ask of them to do, being mindful of the fact that they see us as being a risk?
So personal risk is always a very individual decision, and my take on it is that it's going to vary case by case. If you're sitting with a client and they either don't want to collaborate or they don't want to cooperate, my take on it is that at a certain point you can always open your heart up and just say, I'm not sure, Harry, let's say, what it is that you want to get out of this discussion. So let's just go back to basics and talk about why you're interested in the kind of things that we do as a company. I know you're a little bit interested because you've let me come in the door. And it's appropriate to even make jokes like that, right?
Yep.
Like, you're a customer, you're busy, you could say, no, I don't want to see Peter Fillmore, but somehow you let me come in the door. And so open up a little bit and ask them, because the private agenda is actually more important than the corporate agenda. So it's a very good question. My first reaction was, how can you fit a question like that into 140 characters and get it out here on Twitter? Probably didn't put a whole bunch of hashtags into the message, but anyway, it's a good question. So anyway, the answer is, I want to go a little deeper. I think that clients also mislead us because at some point they just want to get the meeting over. And there's actually a question of meeting timing. So if you get into skill issues, every meeting has a rhythm. One of the sales gurus that I know, Bob Urachek is his name, great guy. I've mentioned him in one of the blogs we published recently. And he says it's really helpful to start out by saying, I'm assuming we're here today for 30 minutes. Is that correct? Is that still your plan? Is that okay with your schedule? And if they say, no, I had an interruption, or, I came in 15 minutes late, so now we've only got 15 because I got a hard stop. So clarify the question of how much time you have. And then my take on it is the heart-to-heart proposal, whether it's a proposal that we collaborate on your outline or whatever comes up in the meeting, happens about halfway through. It doesn't happen 1 minute before the end. Okay, 90% of the way through the meeting, you're into saying, thank you very much, it's been a good discussion, we've got an agreed action plan, those kind of things. It's not give them a decision to make. So that's my addition. Does that help, and does that answer the question?
Yes, I think that when you get down to it, you have to pick your times, right? And when you do that properly and you open up and say, I believe that this is a really valuable solution for your company, do you personally feel strongly about this solution? You want to hear what really they have and what they stand to gain by the solution being there. And so long as that trust isn't betrayed and you're not then using that information just to move past them to a higher, part of the company hierarchy, you're probably going to get a good answer from them, and that's really useful insight. I want to zoom back for 1 second to the company. I'm sure that we've got people on the call who are listening and wondering how to implement this, and there are a few gaps I'm sure that they're seeing with what they need to do can we take a minute and talk about skills? Is it a simple assumption that everybody who does sales today is skilled in knowing how to follow the method that you've outlined, or are there ways that needs to be beefed up? And also, is there a larger piece of this that includes marketing that needs to be looked at when a company is thinking of shifting over to this method for speeding up sales?
Well, that's a big question, Glenn. So you're talking about skills, and you're also talking about other things that company might be doing. So it's very much case by case. What I find is that any team I get involved in and meet has a very unique dynamic. So the company success in selling actually starts with their product category. Whether it's a new product category or not is a huge factor. The maturity of the category. Again, Jeff Moore's ideas about crossing the chasm. Are they looking for early buyers? Are they looking for niche market buyers? Some people in sales waste a lot of time because they're looking for anybody that will buy something. And if the best buyers are always going to be engineering teams, or if they're selling a financial package, but the financial package fits perfectly for a law firm, then maybe you should just be building a list of 5,000 law firms and only focus on those. So niche markets are important. Salesmen actually dream of tornadoes, by the way, so that's one of the things. If the product line is in a case like some mobile devices are right now, where they're in a tornado, people just come in the door and they say, I want one. So most of it is order taking. Then when that phase is over, it gets more competitive again. So I'm thinking about a mix of markets that are typically more likely to be niche markets and or mature markets, where the salesperson and their business skill at interacting has to become part of the differentiator.
That's great. Appreciate that answer. It is going to be particular to cases. I think the takeaway from what you've said is that executives need to have eyes open on what switching over to a smart funnel type method is going to take, and that they really need to be committed. It sounds like it's certainly a bit of work to get there, but it certainly beats some of the old spray and pray methods and some of the atrocious forecasts that we've all lived through.
And I got a story, actually, as you're talking about organizations and executive management views. There was a salesperson who read a white paper that I wrote years ago. I won't mention his name, but he was actually very successful because it was his first sales management job. And basically the CFO identified the fact that he was clueless about managing the funnel and said, you've got to get some structure to how you approach clients and how you coach your guys on what to do and how you provide input to the forecast. So the CFO, as you know, is always concerned about the forecast. But she was clever enough to know there's a bunch of other dynamic behind putting good information into a forecast and all of that. So this gentleman was actually very successful because he didn't have a bias on processes. He just took the method, said, it looks good to me, turned a white paper into a set of slides internally, showed them to the team and said, this is how we're going to sell. This is how I'm going to manage. So when we look at a list of opportunities, these are the questions I'm going to ask you. And he had a team of 2 people, I think, initially. He grew that team to 18 people over a period of 3 years, globally, all over North America, Europe, some people in the Far East. They got the company up to about $10 million a year, and then they sold the company for $42 million. So,
and I think
you
everybody who's looking at implementing this knows that that's a good scenario. So that certainly sounds like payoff to me. I want to remind everyone that you can take just a second. If there's anything that you would like to ask, now's your chance. Go ahead and put it into the panel on the right-hand side of your screen. We'll read them right away and get them in. And if we don't see any, we will then be finishing up the webinar. Peter did want to find out whether or not you think that it's easier for a sales rep or an executive, or let's say a CEO of a company, to look at this and decide that it's for them? Or is a sales rep on their own, let's say if they don't have the support of top management right away for something like this, can they start to even implement some of these ideas right away on their own opportunities?
Oh, absolutely. I definitely believe the top salespeople are actively looking for ideas like this. Like, how can I sell better? How can I give myself an edge? Because life is competitive across companies. It's also competitive within the company. If you're ambitious and you want to go places, either within your own company or within your longer-term career plan, I believe an individual salesman can take this, implement these ideas, and get going. The example I gave you was of a sales manager doing it. It worked very well for him. But what I do see is that among sales professionals, there are few who will actually do this. They often take the processes that are there and just work with them. And it's actually very hard to resist that customer request, just give me a proposal. It is very hard to resist that. So
someone even mentioned that it's hard to keep a methodology where you want to go through and find out exactly, and you want to quantify what the customer needs when they're screaming at you, give me my damn proposal. But you're saying that you think it's still far better to stand apart from the crowd, because the sales reps that they're seeing before and after you walk out the door will happily give them that proposal right away. But you're saying it's far better to dig deep at that time and really find out what the time drivers, what the payback are, and then when you do give them a proposal, it's going to go much farther than all the other quotes that are lobbed at them from your competitors.
I'll actually give you an example of this. I was asked to go look at a stalled deal in New York City, and flew down to sit with a salesman. Of course, we did a lot of preparation on what the situation was, but this is a fairly simple decision that wasn't going to cost more than $20,000 or $30,000. And of course, the company was doing it. It was internet services in the hotel industry, and this hotel company had a technology guy that had been kicking the tires for ages. And we arranged a meeting with the CFO of the hotel company, a technology guy, sat down, went through the situation. And I basically played this script, and this was more than 10 years ago, by the way. So, and I've used the script since then in other situations. The reason I'm telling you this particular story is that when I said, I'd like to go through these things, I've got notes, I see it falls into 3 buckets. It happens to be, what are your needs as a summary? What kind of paybacks do you want? What benefits? We've got an analysis. We'll tailor it to your company. And I want to look at the timetable issues, because you've actually got quite a number of properties at different stages of development, right? Again, it has to be tailored to the industry and the customer. And you've got to be quick enough to do that in the meeting. What do you think if we work through this together and have 3 meetings over the next 3 weeks at this time over the telephone? I'll send you material before the meeting. He said, fine. CFO jumped in. And the senior people are like this because that's what they want. They're actually suspicious that their people aren't doing the job on getting a grip on the mini business plan that defines what they should do to solve a problem. And so we went home and did it, and by the time we'd finished the second meeting, I got an unsolicited email saying, please send us the contracts. We want to commit to this and get started quicker. So I'm telling you, please listen to this. You'll get customers doing the closing on you when you use this methodology.
I love that. And it does sound like, whether you say it vocally to the customer or not, or you just think it in your head, when you need that fortitude to be able to not give them that snap proposal, it's, look, let's take a minute and go through each one of these and find the value. Trust me, you'll thank me. Yeah. That sounds like what you as a sales rep need to really believe and internalize, so that you can go through the due diligence, and that the client, they're like you said, they're going to pull it through and close it for you if you properly go through this.
That's right, Glenn.
So in conclusion, I want to thank everyone for joining today, and I want to remind you that, as Peter said, there are both products and services that can help with this. They're all accessible on the SmartFunnel website, and the encouragement is to go there and check out. You said also that you've recently announced a HubSpot partnership, and so for lead generation needs, there's also an ability there to work with clients and then bring that series of leads down into the sales opportunities that they can really get going on closing as business. As a housekeeping note, I want to remind everyone that the recording for this webinar will be made available to you, and I want to thank you very much for going through it. If, as you receive that recording, or even now have further questions, you're more than welcome to go on Twitter or email Peter, and his coordinates are there to get answers to your questions. And with that, we want to thank you very much and wish you a great day.